My name is Kip Nicely. I'm with the Governor Gary Johnson campaign, GaryJohnson2012.com if you're online. We want to welcome you to our third national town hall. It's with Yowie.com. And it's going to be a different format tonight. Governor Johnson will be introduced first by Professor Robert Gutman here from the University of, or Johns Hopkins University. They're sharing space here tonight with the University of California, Washington. We want to welcome our live audience here tonight, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions as well as our national and international audience that is online with Yowie.com. We at times have these as specific topics that the Governor has spoken on tonight as an open forum, so get your questions ready. For those in the live audience here, if you could just form up to your right, and we'll queue you up, and you'll be sitting in this chair and sitting down and asking the Governor whatever questions on your mind. He doesn't screen anything in advance. We don't pre-pick the questions, so open up and ask anything that you'd like to him, and this is your opportunity to get those questions answered. This is important. We've got a presidential contest coming up about 1 year from now. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Professor Gutman.
My name is Bob Gutman. I'm the director of the Center on Politics and Foreign Relations over at Johns Hopkins, and I'm also a visiting professor here at the University of California. So I thank you all for coming. I usually do these with Financial Times in the morning, but tonight I'm honored to have presidential candidate, GOP presidential candidate Gary Johnson, who you may not have seen in the debates because he hasn't been in a lot of the debates, which is not good. And hopefully he'll be in a couple more debates coming up. But he's a former governor of New Mexico, a two-term governor of New Mexico, a very successful businessman, a mountain climber who's climbed several Mount Everest and several other high peaks around the world. And he's, as I just noticed here, a magazine called him one of the sanest candidates for president. As I said, he's a fiscal conservative, but he's a social libertarian. He believes in a limited government, and he stands apart from quite a few of the other candidates. And he has a view on drugs that's interesting. It's different than the other candidates. He has a view on immigration and offense on our borders. It's different than the other candidates. And he's a candidate that thinks he could beat Barack Obama in November of 2012. So I'm honored to introduce Governor Gary Johnson.
Great, thank you. I made very few promises when I ran for governor of New Mexico, but I kept all the promises that I made. I'm making very few promises running for president of the United States. I'm promising three things. One is I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Now that isn't promising to balance the budget. That's promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That's going to be a document that is going to lay out a 43% reduction in federal spending. Now, somebody look at that as such a negative. Now, let's look at the positive here. The positive is that we saved this country from what I think is a monetary collapse, and it's just due to the mathematics of continuing to spend more money than what we take in. So to prevent that monetary collapse, that's what we do. Now, what's a monetary collapse? That's what happened in Russia. And what happened in Russia is that the ruble inflated to the point where it wasn't worth anything. So what was daily life in Russia like when the ruble wasn't worth anything? Well, here's what happened in Russia. Russia developed the most sophisticated barter system of any country that the planet has ever known, where basically if you worked in the chainsaw factory and you went out and you worked all week, you got paid with a chainsaw on Friday. And you took the chainsaw, and within a matter of hours, you traded the chainsaw for milk and eggs and gasoline and clothing, and that's how it worked. I don't know if we really want to do that in this country, but that's a monetary collapse. That's a way of life that none of us can envision. And so that's the negative side of a monetary collapse. That's the negative side of continuing to spend more money than what you take in. On the positive side, which is what we all ought to be looking at, is that we can fix this. We can actually prevent this from happening. But to do that, what we need to do is balance the budget. So I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm also promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. Now, first of all, I'm elected President of the United States promising to do these two things. What is that? What is America shouting at Congress if I'm elected President of the United States? Balance the budget. That's what they're shouting. Balance the budget. Promising to veto legislation that exceeds revenue. I would like you to know that I'm not adverse to vetoing bills. I may have vetoed more bills as governor of New Mexico than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I had thousands of line item vetoes as governor of New Mexico. Only 2 were overridden, so it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to government telling you or I what we should or shouldn't do in the bedroom, which is something that I don't think government should be legislating. So promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, which would be the fiscal year 2014, promising to veto expenditures that exceed revenue, I suggest to you that if you have a president that's going to do those two things, that number one, Congress will have to override the veto, which they'll do, but I suggest to you that spending will be lower in this scenario than any other possible scenario. So when people talk about, well, you can't cut spending. You can't cut spending. It'll be too much of a hardship. How much of a hardship is it going to be for you to pick up your chainsaw on a Friday afternoon after working all week long and then going out and bartering that chainsaw for what it is that you need? That's going to be real hardship. The third thing that I'm promising to do is I'm promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax. If you haven't checked out the fair tax, check it out, fairtax.org. It will really, as the name implies, be fair. It'll reboot the American economy. It does away with all existing federal tax. It does away with federal withholdings from your payroll check. Those withholdings will come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. So it does away with income tax. It does away with corporate tax. It does away with withholdings. It does away with the IRS. It's a 23% federal consumption tax. Now, if you're thinking 23% federal consumption tax, you're going to add 23% cost to all goods and services? Not, yes, new goods and services, but contained in all goods and services right now is 23% tax. It's just not transparent. So a Coca-Cola today that sells for $1 has 23% tax built into that dollar. You enact the fair tax, and in a very short amount of time, Coca-Cola doesn't have to sell that Coke for $1 anymore to get the same profit. They can sell it for 80 cents. So it ends up to be cost neutral over a very short amount of time. When you talk about competitiveness with Chinese goods, imagine American goods and services costing or being able to be sold at 23% less. That's making American goods and services competitive. It's not regressive because it issues everyone in the country a $200 a month rebate check, which allows everyone in the country, each of us get $2,400 a year from the government, paid ahead of time. It allows all of us to pay for the fair tax up to the point of the poverty level. It's kind of an unavoidable fair tax that gets charged. Because it eliminates corporate income tax along with individual income tax, if in a business environment of zero corporate tax, This country does not, the private sector in this country does not create tens of millions of jobs. I don't know under what scenario that you would have tens of millions of jobs created. It will happen. So this is really optimistic. Reboot the American economy for the next 100 years and do it in a way that's fair. I was at Occupy Wall Street a couple of weeks ago. I share in the outrage of Occupy Wall Street that this country doles it out unfairly. And at the heart of doling it out unfairly is money. And it's people that pay money, it's groups that pay money, it's politicians that pay money to get unfair treatment, to buy loopholes from politicians. Politicians take the money and they pass the special legislation that doesn't dole it out fairly. What this country can provide is a level playing field that all of us can have equal opportunity to the American dream. This is, in my opinion, really exciting. It's the fair tax. It's fair. It's as the name implies. The more money you make, the more fair tax you'll pay. It will also promote savings. So what we need to do to prevent a monetary collapse is we need to stop printing money. We balance the federal budget. We can stop printing money for ongoing needs in this country. Because we're promoting savings with the fair tax, when it comes to the rollover of the $15 trillion in debt that this country currently has, it's a lot more Americans having money to be able to invest, perhaps, in U.S. treasuries as opposed to the United States government having to print that rollover. So that's also another component of all this that points toward us having to deal with this issue now. Talking a little bit about a 43% reduction in federal spending. How do you do that? Well, I think you need to start off by talking about Medicaid and Medicare. As governor of New Mexico, I oversaw the reform of Medicaid in New Mexico, which is health care to the poor. I got an insurance policy as governor of New Mexico. It was issued by Presbyterian Health Care in New Mexico. We did the math. What if we gave every Medicaid recipient in New Mexico my health insurance policy as governor of New Mexico? Would we really save hundreds of millions of dollars by doing that? Because it was a fee-for-service model in New Mexico that we were now going to change to a managed care model, which in essence was giving everybody the insurance policy that I had, my health insurance policy. And yes, that's exactly what we did. And yes, we saved hundreds of millions of dollars, and we set up a better healthcare network in the state, much better healthcare network. I believe that if I were given control, or if I were to have overseen the delivery of healthcare to the poor in New Mexico, that if I were given 43% less money by the federal government, if the federal government would have eliminated all the strings and the mandates associated with Medicaid, but allowed me free rein on how I was going to deliver health care to the poor with 43% less money, I believe that I could have effectively overseen that delivery. Medicare in this country is the same model. Medicare is a fee-for-service model nationally. Give it to the states. If I would have been, I maintain that if I would have been given health care delivery to those over 65, that if the federal government would have given the state of New Mexico 43% less money than what they were currently spending, done away with all the strings and the mandates associated on how that was supposed to be administered, that I could have done that in New Mexico. So give Medicare and Medicaid to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's what you're going to have nationwide. You're going to have 50 laboratories working on this, and there's going to be some fabulous success that'll get emulated. There'll be some pretty spectacular failure that we'll all avoid, but the notion of Washington knows best, the notion that Washington one size fits all, that has us in the predicament that we're in. That's Medicaid, that's Medicare with a 43% reduction, and that's how we make that take place. Military spending. In this document, in my promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, is going to be a 43% reduction in military spending. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we're spending so much more money than what we're taking in, and that we're bankrupt, and that if we don't fix this, we're going to find ourselves in the midst of a monetary collapse. So, military spending. Can we provide a strong national defense for this country and still cut military spending by 43%? I think the operative question here is defense. The operative word is defense. And yes, we can, as opposed to offense and as opposed to nation building. So 43% reduction in military spending. Do we need 2,300 nuclear warheads? Do we need to blow up the world 9 times, or will 4 times do? So I think we can cut our nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. I think that we can reduce our military presence worldwide by 43%. Do we need 100,000 troops in Europe? Might 57,000 troops do? I have a hard time understanding why we have any troops at all in Europe, much less 100,000. So I think there's room to do this. Those in uniform, the civilian support to those in uniform, research and development. We seem to continue to be fighting wars in the past as opposed to what's happening in the future. And we've talked about this for decades, but we've never really taken steps to make sure that that happens. And then the conflicts that we're currently involved in. I was opposed to Iraq before we went into Iraq. I think there needs to be a military threat from abroad before we take military action. I didn't see that Iraq had any weapons of mass destruction, but if they would have had weapons of mass destruction, this is going back to 2003, gosh, don't we have the military surveillance capability to see them roll out these weapons of mass destruction? And if they do, we can go in and deal with that. If we go into Iraq, aren't we going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end? Afghanistan, I thought initially, was totally warranted. We were attacked, we attacked back, and after having been in Afghanistan for 6 months, we wiped out Al-Qaeda. That was 10 years ago. So we're building, and other countries in the world, and don't we have those same needs here in this country? Libya, I was immediately. Aren't we still involved in a civil war in Libya? Where was the military threat from Libya? And we're going to end up picking a winner and loser in Libya. And might that turn out similar to Mubarak in Egypt, where this turned out to be the lesser of two evils, and we were making that decision as opposed to the Egyptian people? Let's stop our foreign involvement in other countries, but let's maintain this notion that we should provide ourselves with a strong national defense, and it should be based on a military threat first and foremost. So that's reducing federal government expenditures by 43%. I believe in free markets. I believe there's a magic to free markets. Free market approaches to healthcare, free market approaches to energy, free market approaches to education. What's the best thing that the federal government could do when it comes to education in this country? I think it's to abolish the Federal Department of Education, and here's why. The Federal Department of Education gives each state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends. But it comes with 16 cents to send them in the first place to have it sent back as less money to begin with. And do you all know when the Department of Education was established in this country? I think most people are surprised to find out that it was 1979 that the Department of Education was established. Just get the Department of Education eliminated, give education to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's just what you'll have. Spectacular success by some states that'll get emulated, some miserable failure by other states that will get avoided, but in a 50-state laboratory, we're going to improve education in this country dramatically, as opposed to Washington knows best, Washington top-down really has the answers. I am not in the debates. Out of 15 debates, I've been in 2 of the debates. And may I explain to you why I haven't been in the debates? You might be thinking, well, it's because you don't have a certain percentage in the polls. Well, I'm not in the polls that they're determining whether or not I get into the debates. That's not fair. CNN, 5 CNN polls ago, had me at 2% of the national vote. That tied me with Kane. That put me ahead of Huntsman and Santorum. In their next 4 national polls, they took my name off of the poll. When the networks determine who gets in the debates, they're saying you have to have a certain percentage, you have to have a certain polling in A, B, C poll. I'm not in A, B, C poll. By any measurement, that's not fair. During the last Fox debate, Fox chose to determine or interpret those rules as the last 5 national polls where my name was in the poll. I thought that was fair. And last week, CNBC held a debate where they had 2 criteria for the debate. One was you had to be registered to run for president, which I am. The other one was you had to be at 3% in any national poll before November 1st. You can't make that up, right? You can't make the result up either. I was at 3% in a Gallup poll in May. I was excluded from that debate, and CNBC refused to answer our calls to CNBC to demand inclusion in a debate based on their criteria. I'm not in the debate, but I think I offer a different voice in every single issue. And if I may give you an example of how I differ from every other candidate on that stage, and use immigration as that issue. When it comes to the debate on stage, candidate number 1 wants to build a fence across the border. Candidate number 2 wants to build a parallel fence to the first fence. Candidate number 3 wants to run a moat down the middle of those 2 fences. Candidate number 4 wants to run barbed wire across the top of the 2 fences. Candidate number 5 wants to electrify the barbed wire, and candidate number 6 wants to have drone patrols over the entire fence. The answer is to not build a fence. Don't build a fence. It would be an incredible waste of money. And then for the only candidate up there who doesn't want to build a fence, which is Rick Perry, who's a border governor, New Mexico former governor, border governor, don't build a fence. Build a fence around Washington to keep you in or out of Washington. If you decide you want to get in and out of Washington and there's a fence and you're telling me that that's going to keep you in or out, it's not. It would be an incredible waste of money. But the only other governor that says don't build a fence is Rick Perry. But you know what Rick Perry has to say with regard to the drug violence on the border? And the fact that 40,000 people have died over the last 4 years because of the drug violence? He wants to add guns to that equation. He wants to militarize the border even more than it already is. So combat guns with more guns, and actually every other candidate on stage also agrees with that, with the exception of Ron Paul. But Ron Paul wants to build a fence. I'm not sure why that's the case. Don't build the fence. Make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but just a work visa so that we can conduct a background check and make sure that there aren't criminals coming into the country. We can give them a Social Security card so that applicable taxes would get paid, And if we implement the fair tax, it won't even be an issue because the fair tax is unavoidable. Whether you're a legal or illegal immigrant or a visitor, everybody pays the fair tax. It's unavoidable. And then when it comes to border violence, legalize marijuana, and arguably 75% of the border violence with Mexico will go away because that's the estimate of the drug cartel's activities that are engaged in the marijuana trade. If we can't connect the dots between 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years with prohibition and the fact that when we prohibited alcohol, disputes got played out on the streets with machine guns, got played out in the streets with guns as opposed to in the courts. Let's get these issues in the courts. Let's bring an end to border violence. Let's bring an end to the violence that exists in this country because of drug prohibition. So I am the different voice. I wouldn't be in this contest if it weren't about the issues. It's about the issues. And it's about an optimism about the future of this country. We can fix these issues. Social Security is an issue that also comes up. Under the fair tax, you won't pay Social Security anymore as part of the withholding out of your payroll check. You'll get your full payroll check, and your employer won't pay the match to Social Security anymore. The proceeds for the fund for Social Security will come out of the fair tax. But Social Security is not cutting Social Security. Very simply, Social Security is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. So to do that, we can raise the retirement age. We can have a means testing that's very fair. And that would be that if you paid in a certain amount of money into Social Security, which in the fair tax, this becomes a non-issue. But for those that have paid into Social Security, here's what you paid in, here's what your employer has matched that. A means testing would be, should you be able to get more money back than what you paid in if you're making a certain amount of money? I think a means testing would be something very fair, and it would save a lot of money when it comes to Social Security. And also change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. So without exception, I think the issues of the day here need to be met by common sense solutions that really are optimistic. We should be optimistic about our future. We can set a course here where for the next 100 years we can have prosperity, we can have peace, and we can be vigilant to what are bad actors out there. And government has a role. Government absolutely has a role. Do I want to eliminate the EPA? No, I don't want to eliminate the EPA. I think there's a 43% largesse built into most government, that a 43% reduction in federal spending will really bleed out that largesse. But the EPA, for example, there are polluters. And as governor of New Mexico, I saw it. And if it wasn't for the EPA, they'd still be polluting to this day. But because of the EPA, we were able to shut them down. And I, as governor, was able to use that agency to be able to do that. So government has a role to protect us against individuals that would do us harm, and that's businesses that would do us harm, and government has a role to provide for a strong national defense, that we're not threatened militarily, and that our way of life ends up changed. I really appreciate all of you being here live. I really appreciate everybody on Yowie tonight. This is our third Yowie town hall. And really, this is an opportunity for anybody in the world to come online and ask a question and to participate in this forum. So I think we'll start that, and that will be a process of questions, comments, insults. Bring them on. We're going to alternate between a live audience, which gets seen on the Yowie feed, and then those online.
David McDonald from UCLA. My question would be, who would you think is your greatest intellectual influence?
It might be Milton Friedman. I just, the more I read, school choice, talking about drug reform, talking about sharing the competitive currencies and how we could bring back a commodity-based currency, gold, silver, without exception. I think Milton Friedman really was a visionary, and he was also a pragmatist. How can we address the problems that we have in the best way possible? And maybe it isn't absolutely the best way to do it, but pragmatically, how do we move forward on these issues? Thank you. And Charlie, you want to voice?
We're going to do
three first.
Oh, three and then three. Okay.
And then we'll switch.
Krista Perry, also from UCLA. I think you have a lot of great practical solutions, but I guess my question is, what would you consider your philosophy of government? Is it okay to maybe violate someone's individual rights as long as you're doing it efficiently and under budget?
No, we shouldn't be violating individual rights. And now I'm back to Governor of New Mexico and those 750 vetoes. Those 750 vetoes was a lot of legislation that got passed that I think was going to dictate how we were going to have to run our lives or our businesses, and wasn't going to make a difference in our lives and businesses other than to add a whole lot of money and a whole lot of cost and actually criminalize activity that otherwise wouldn't be criminal. So making marijuana illegal. I remember one particular bill that was going to make it criminal, hold a parent criminally liable for their children possessing pornography. TSA would also not exist. I would have left airline security to the airports and to the airlines. And I think that today, that airline security, airport security would be as safe and less intrusive. Thank you.
Hi, Governor. My name is Nick Cantor, and I'm from UCLA. And I was just wondering what motivated you to run this time around as opposed to back in 2008 or maybe in 2016. And also, what have you done since you left office in 2003?
Well, since 2003, I've had my share of adventures. I'm an athlete, so I climbed Mount Everest right out of office. I got involved in a couple of entrepreneurial ventures, remaining an entrepreneur, where I didn't make any money at either of them, but I didn't lose any money either. And there were some really big ideas. One of them was actually the garbage dump of the future. So it was to actually buy Westinghouse plasma and subject garbage to a plasma torch. And you were going to end up with a 20% solid component, and you were actually going to generate electricity doing it. You were going to put 100 units of electricity in and put 120 units of electricity out. I mean, this was exciting. This was the garbage dump of the future. Didn't work out because it ended up being 100 units of electricity in and 70 units out, and that was the big cost. But it took a lot of money to be able to hash all of that out. I was also in a really horrible paragliding accident 5 years ago that took me 3 years to recover from. And as a result of that, I put a tool belt back on, and myself, along with a dozen other people, built my dream house north of Taos. So I have something very productive to show for it, which is that home. But thank you.
Excellent. Well, it's a pleasure meeting you in Nevada. My name is Rich Mooney again. I'm the 1.2 million member Poker Players Alliance. I want to ask you about the online poker question. We had a hearing today in the Senate and had a hearing tomorrow in the House about licensing games. So Congress is finally moving away from this paradigm of trying to ban playing poker in their own homes. So my question is, what is your thought on the rights of Americans to play poker in their own homes with their own money? What's your opinion on that brand of conservatism? It's this big government is a valuable tool to influence societal values.
So if I may educate everyone online and here, the United States government banned U.S. citizens from playing poker online. Now, I think there are millions of online poker players that this is their passion. And so this went offshore, and recently the government cracked down on the offshore, so you have arguably 10 million poker players that were playing poker online, and we've completely shut down that industry. The Republicans passed the legislation in Congress. Bush signed the legislation, and so we now have 10 million Americans that are denied their passion. I think this is an example of dozens of other issues where government steps in, and who are they protecting? Who are they protecting when they ban you from playing poker online? If that's your passion, well, they shouldn't step in the way of that. I think this would be tens of thousands of jobs in this country, but let's not look at it from a job standpoint. Let's just look at it from the standpoint of liberty and freedom and your ability to be able to enjoy the passions that you have. One of my passions is mountain biking. And the federal government is denying me access to public trails on public lands, but they're allowing horses and horse excrement on those same trails. I'm being denied my passion, and in far fewer mountain bikers than there are poker players. But to what end? Who is being protected here? And this is just government that continues to eat away at what we can and can't do in this country. And this is what government should not be doing, and this is what government continues to do. I will tell you, as governor of New Mexico, I made a huge difference in the state, regardless of the legislature, because I controlled all the agencies. I appointed the heads of all the agencies. I appointed all boards and commissions, which, by the way, the president does also when it comes to the federal government. President appoints the heads of all the agencies, appoints boards and commissions. Governor of New Mexico, I controlled rules and regulations. President of the United States controls rules and regulations. Rules and regulations in New Mexico got better on a daily basis, and that got better had a basis in common sense. I had a program in New Mexico that I called Open Door After 4, where the third Thursday of every month I met with anybody in the state, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night on 5-minute increments. Nobody was denied access to me as governor of New Mexico. I thought it made a huge difference in the category of rules and regulations. I was able to find out a lot of government atrocity, was able to step right in the middle of it and make a huge difference. As President of the United States, I'm promising to have an open door after 4 for waste, fraud, and abuse, which I think will make a huge difference.
Hi, Governor Johnson. Brendan Borderline from UC Riverside. I was actually at the Drug Policy Alliance conference a couple weeks ago, and I saw you there, so it's good to see you again. We've all seen, or most of us know about the Department of Justice crackdown on medical marijuana in California and all the chaos and destruction and heartache that that's caused. Surprising, because in Obama's campaign, he repeatedly said he would not make medical marijuana a priority. As president, what would you do to make sure that your Department of Justice doesn't run amok and trample on states' rights like this one has?
So that was to my earlier point. As President of the United States, the President of the United States appoints the Attorney General, Holder, and Holder issued a letter about a month ago that said, if you are a medical marijuana dispenser in California, that we're going to shut you down. Well, Obama, when he was running for office, promised that he would not spend any federal money cracking down on medical marijuana facilities in a state that voted that they wanted those facilities. And so Obama controls this directly. Holder should not have issued that letter. He was appointed by Obama. Obama ultimately controls the actions of every single agency. And this is just an example of what government can do and does do. It's government amok. Shouldn't have happened, and the person that you should hold responsible for this is Obama, because he controls the Department of Justice, because he appointed Holder. States' rights, 10th Amendment. Should states be allowed to do whatever it is they want to do? I think yes. And I can't think of an example I mean, certainly civil rights, and I also think that gay rights probably come under that same heading. That maybe this is a really a constitutional equal rights, back to civil rights, back to gay rights. That these are nationwide decisions as opposed to potentially states making decisions that would, in my opinion, be discriminatory. Would we still have segregation in the South if left to the states? Maybe, and I don't think that would have been right.
Thank you for being here. My name is James Barber. I'm a student at University of California, Santa Cruz, and I have one question, well, actually two. Do you believe that corporations are people, and do you believe that money should be considered equivalent to speech? And if so, how do you justify that position to citizens who have no money and therefore have less influence in the political process?
Well, and chime in here right off the bat if I'm getting this wrong. I mean, corporations are allowed unlimited contribution, and what do I think about that? Is that kind of it in a nutshell, the question?
Well, basically, I want you to address mainly the question of people without money.
Yeah, corporations in no way should be viewed as individuals, but this is the ruling that allows corporations to make unlimited contribution, which is that view. When it comes to campaign finance reform, it's my opinion that the reform that's needed in this country is very simply 100% transparency. It doesn't exist today, and that's what needs to exist. Know where the money is coming from. And because of unlimited contribution, because of super PACs, you can actually have money donated, and it cannot be identified from where it came from. I've said this many times during this campaign running for president. I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I do just as seriously as tongue-in-cheek. All politicians should wear jackets similar to NASCAR drivers that have patches on the jackets that not only show the sponsors, but are commensurate with the size of the donation. I mean, let's just really make this transparent.
So, I guess to follow up, you wouldn't be opposed to unlimited donations if they're transparent.
And if I may cite an example, in New Mexico when I ran for governor, my largest contributor was someone who gave my campaign $100,000. He never was on the phone, never asked for anything during during 2 terms. He donated $150,000. He was the largest single contributor to my campaign. Never once did he ask for anything, not a thing. When you limit contribution, like in this case to $2,500 as an individual contribution, or if you had a limit of contribution in New Mexico, let's say of $1,000, I am going to go out on a limb here. 150 contributors of $1,000 each, 8 of them would have been on the phone at least to ask me for something.
But doesn't that still, I mean, I guess I'm just...
Back to transparency. If you know this guy's given me $150,000 and you can keep your eye on him, if you know that Coca-Cola has given me, sorry Coke, General Ford Motors gives me $1 million, but they give it to me in a roundabout way where nobody can identify that, that's not right. But you should be able to identify that Ford Motors gave me $1 million, or IBM gave me $1 million, or Goldman Sachs gave me $1 million. You should be able to identify that. And currently you can't.
But even if you can identify it, doesn't this rule and this jurisprudence actually make money the currency of democracy as opposed to direct action or speech by a human being?
I would disagree. I would say that because of unlimited the notion of limiting contribution, of making contribution small, favors the incumbent. That if you are an incumbent, if you have the most important name in politics is your name. So if you're somebody who wants to unseat the incumbent, and you have to limit your contribution to $1,000, let's just say this is the Senate race in California. Well, if you want to unseat the sitting senator in California and you're limited to $1,000 per contribution, I got news for you. You're not going to unseat the incumbent. But if you have somebody, Steve Jobs, let's say, is your uncle, and he knows you're was your uncle, and I mean, not levity there, but and was able to contribute $100 million to your campaign because he knew you were the better candidate, you have a chance of unseating the incumbent rightfully because of Steve Jobs. Because you have, yes, but rightfully, but transparent, but you have that chance that wouldn't exist if campaign contributions were limited. And I'm telling you the reality here. You would not stand a chance running for Senate in California if you had a limited contribution of $1,000 per contributor. And I use that as it'd be back to $2,500 limit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being
Absolutely, thank you.
The last couple decades have seen a pretty massive explosion in technology, and therefore in the way that we communicate with each other and with our society and express ourselves. I mean, we see, plainly here being able to sit in DC and broadcast throughout the world. It also has caused a need for a sort of fundamental reanalysis of a couple of very large industries and markets that have behind them 300 years of legal history, music, movies, books, and things. I guess I'm wondering what your opinion is of the federal government's role in the protection of intellectual property, and maybe specifically as it relates to the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Acts that are currently being discussed in the Congress.
Well, you'll be and please, I really want to make this interactive. So if I'm not getting at the heart of what you're asking, I want you to interrupt and tell me that that's not the case. But obviously, very complex. So when it comes to established property, intellectual rights, books, music, yes, that should be protected. At what point do you allow Hey Jude, though, to be recorded by other recording artists? I realize that there is a formula in place for that. When it comes to intellectual property rights and the recent ruling by this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was the Supreme Court or Congress that has passed legislation that says that you can establish intellectual property, the thought of intellectual property, as opposed to actually the product of intellectual property. And to me, that steps over the line, because now you have big corporations that are filing literally hundreds of patents, and you come up with the idea, you actually implement the idea, and you didn't know that a patent existed for a product that doesn't exist because it was based on an idea, but you didn't know this, but you actually bring that idea to fruition with a product, and now you're crossways with a corporation that filed 100 or 1,000 patents based on idea, as opposed to, that's not right either. So I don't want to downplay the complexity of this issue, other than to say I think I have a sense of just how complex this is, and I take the view that no, you shouldn't be able to file on the basis of idea as opposed to idea and product.
Thank you.
Thanks. I guess that means I did okay. Looking forward, energy is going to be produced with less carbon emission going forward than it is today, as it is today versus decades prior. So I'm opposed to cap and trade. I do think that this should be a market approach to carbon, and technologies become 100% more efficient. And maybe it isn't 100% more efficient in their production of electricity, but how we potentially store it and pulse it at high times rather than low times. But the bet is that every 5 years, all these technologies get 100% more efficient. That is not happening. It's not even close to happening. But if it were, and we should continue to try and develop, so I'm getting your point that government may be the only entity that can finance this kind of endeavor. But if we did have the 100% efficiency improvement every 5 years, the green space would provide us 15% of our energy needs in 15 years. That doesn't cut it. So we really have to rely on traditional sources. That's the reality, and that is coal, and that's nuclear, and that's natural gas and oil.
My question is, if you're not successful in the elected president this year, we try to get in 2016, and in particular, it seems to me the press has the network that an easier time ignoring you because you're not currently holding elected office. Do you consider running for again or some other elected office make it more difficult for them to me?
Man, you give me credit for a lot more energy than. No, I'm flattered by what you're saying, but no, I have no intention of running for any other office. I'd be a horrible congressperson or senator. I think it's a job that entails bellying up to the trough. And that's just the reality. You might like to think that it's otherwise, but that's the reality, and that's what has us strapped with the problems that we have. I am really personally outraged over the fact that I feel abandoned by the Republican Party, having served 2 terms very successfully making that pitch as governor of New Mexico. So that's my outrage. And it's about the issues, too. It's not about me. It is about the issues. And if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else in 2016 that picks up on these issues and moves them forward. And that's really what's most important. So I would just, like I say, I really want to take some jabs at the Republican Party for leaving me hanging out to dry.
Thank you for being here, Governor. One question. Do the news networks have the right to be the decider of who gets on the debates, or should there be a law that creates like a flat standard for every network who holds a debate that says, who can be on the debate?
Well, so I was asked what suggestion would I have regarding the existing debate system, and my suggestion was that and others, if you're not a former elected official, you could also, there needs to be a rule there also. But if you're a former elected official at the congressional, senatorial, or gubernatorial level, I think that, and you're a declared candidate for president, I think your name should appear on the poll. I don't know why that couldn't be the case for every single. I think there are 41 Republicans on the ballot for president. 41 Republicans. So I don't know as 41 is the number, but I feel like my name should be on the poll.
Is this just an idea or something that you think should be enforced?
Well, I think the Republican Party, the RNC, could put teeth behind this tomorrow, simply saying that if former elected officials are not put on the polls, that you're determining input into the debates on your showing in those polls, that the Republican Party is going to boycott the debate. That all the candidates are going to boycott the debate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, Governor. My name is Shia from UC Berkeley. I've been doing a little reading about you ever since you went on Reddit and talked to all.
Really? From last night? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Red. Okay. I was thinking of red eye last night.
Right.
I got the red eye.
And I want to commend you on, as your term in governor, for not only being pragmatic, but also sticking to your fiscal roots. But I want to ask, had you been elected in 2008 as president, what would you have done at the market crash?
I would not have bailed out Wall Street. I would not have bailed out Wall Street, and I am not operating in a void here when it comes to economics. My economics advisor is Jeff Myron. Jeff Myron, I think, is a renowned free market economist who is at Harvard, kind of an oxymoron. But he has a book on the bookshelves right now, Libertarianism, A through Z. And also there are many other free market economists that are behind this effort. The bottom line is that the consensus of all of them, and this is a 100% consensus, is that there would not have been a system failure if we would not have bailed out Wall Street. That we shouldn't have bailed out Wall Street. You know, there was no criminal prosecution of Wall Street. I think that it's perhaps because there wasn't any real criminal activity. It was just some incredibly bad decision-making that wasn't rewarded with failure. And it should have been rewarded with failure. They should have gone bankrupt. I think they would have rather gone to jail than lose all the money that they should have lost. So the housing crisis, I suggest that if the government would not have stepped in, that you would have seen a much sharper decline in housing prices, but that there would have been a market established. You'd have seen it, that the house that was selling for $180,000 might have bottomed out at $50,000, but at a point, there would have been millions of people move into the marketplace and literally established a bottom, and that wherever we were at in the curve today would be real, and that it would be sustainable, as opposed to never establishing a market bottom. And so we have the malaise that exists today, that who knows how long it exists, because everybody is looking for prices to fall further, which may in fact be in the offing. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. First, I have a comment and then a question. The two are unrelated. I'd like to thank you for your stance on gay rights. I'm a Democrat and I'm gay, but it's refreshing to see a Republican who stands for equality. And my question has to do with representation in the Senate. New Mexico has about 2 million people. California has about 37 million. Both states have 2 senators. Do you feel that's fair?
Yes, but I'm going to kind of shift this too. Yes, I mean, the way that it was originally set up, Congress, of course, would be representational based on population, and every state would have 2 senators. But do you all realize, everyone realized that when the Senate was set up, it was state legislatures that appointed the Senate. It was, which amendment to the Constitution? I'm sorry, 2017. The 17th Amendment to the Constitution changed the appointment of senators to the election of senators. If senators were appointed and the 17th Amendment would have never taken place, we would not be in the situation that we're in today, because senators would have never overspent or dictated to the states that monies that they were going to have to spend or activity that they were going to have to be engaged in, because they were going to owe their allegiance to state legislatures that wanted to do that themselves. So I think one of the big issues of the day is that we did implement the 17th Amendment, which allowed for a popular election of senators as opposed to them being appointed. If they were appointed, we would never have had the overspending that has taken place.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of the candidates
What
on stage,
candidates
the
would you
8
consider
candidates that are
President
on
with?
stage, have all said that they would appoint social conservatives as their vice presidential running mates. So I think I've already been excluded from being a vice president.
Okay,
You may have to read it.
yeah.
This has happened before.
Yeah, terrible the question mistake on their Brandon part. asked They need to is, balance the Governor, ticket. what Some is of your them are position social on current national park funding and the national park system as a whole?
What are government's responsibilities? I mean, and I think this is really one of them. That isn't to say that the national parks couldn't be run more efficiently, but I actually can't speak with any authority on how currently they're being run or how they might be improved. I will say that I enjoy the national parks. If there's something specific, is there something specific?
Well, Brandon, once we fix your voice, we'll come back to you. Meanwhile,
And I'm just pointing out the obvious here. The European turmoil is the whole notion of how many of these securities individual countries' debt are being held by the European banks. It's not transparent. So it's also U.S. banks. There's really no estimate or no accurate judgment on how deep this might run and how this could be a contagion of really a European collapse. So that's the issue right now, is all around uncertainty, and United States saying that they're going to step in and prop up banks or countries is trying to create certainty that's not going to happen, and that's the international. That's the European Central Bank also that I think should be making these pronouncements and not the IMF.
Thanks for being here. I'm Abigail Carlos. I'm at Johns Hopkins University. My question is, in the elections that took place just a couple weeks ago in Mississippi, the voters voted down the measure to give fertilized eggs the same legal status as people. That idea is now on its way to Georgia to be voted on. I'm wondering if, when you were governor of New Mexico, if this had come to you as a bill from the legislature, would you have vetoed it or supported it?
So this is one of those issues where I'm hearing the question, and it's complex. And I'm just, so I don't want to misspeak, but this is one of those issues where I would listen to the arguments on both sides, but I don't ever see myself fundamentally altering from the fact that you as a woman need to be making choice. This is your body that this is going to involve. I'm thinking, listening to you, and that you're the only one that should determine decisions revolving around that. I will say that I did, as governor of New Mexico, sign a bill banning late-term abortion, believing in viability of the fetus at some point. But and that's actually the law of the land. The law of the land in this country is that a woman should have the right to choose up until viability of the fetus, and the viability of the fetus is defined as being able to sustain the fetus outside of the womb, even if by artificial means. That is the current law of the land. Thank you.
Hi, Governor. My name is Julia. I'm from UCLA. And I have a question regarding the U.S. relationship with China. What policy would you implement to continue to foster maybe relationships?
So I'm not the tariff guy, okay? I'm not the tariff guy. If China wants to supplement the goods and services that they send to this country by supplementing those goods and services, I believe that we all benefit from the lower cost of goods and services. And if China wants to subsidize these products that they send to us, ultimately that's in their detriment. And in a free market, ultimately they're going to pay for that. Let them pay for that at some point in the future. I don't know why they're doing it, because it's a burden on the citizens of China to do that they keep their currency artificially low. This is something that they're ultimately going to pay for. And it's not going to be good that they should pay for it. They're choosing to do that. We take advantage of that in a free market economy. We're enjoying the lower cost of goods and services, and because we enjoy the lower cost of goods and services, we don't have to work as much to be able to do that. Fundamentally, how do you address the Chinese issue? You enact the fair tax, where our goods and services end up costing to produce 23% less, that we've become that much more competitive overnight by implementing the fair tax. That's the ultimate solution to China and trade with China. Right now, a lot of talk is being given about the Chinese military threat. I don't buy into the notion that China is loaning us money so that we can drop bombs on them. I don't buy it. I don't buy the notion that China is going to attack the United States, given that they're loaning us the amount of money that they're loaning us. And on the back of a napkin, I've done a calculation that given the amount of money that we've loaned them, and given the amount of interest that we have to pay them every year, that basically we're paying for their military. Out of the military dollar that's being spent worldwide, the United States is spending currently 52% of that military dollar, and we're 5% of the world's population. By comparison, China is spending 9 cents of that dollar. So Chinese competition, I think, is a really good thing. I'd like to see China cure cancer. It would be good for the planet. But the solution to that is the fair tax. The solution to that is a zero corporate tax rate environment in this country, where they're not going to go to China for more favorable treatment, because how can you get more favorable treatment than in a zero tax rate environment? So that's how we make ourselves competitive. And also, I believe that China, there's an untold story with China and the Chinese economy that's going to become very evident here at some point in the future, and that is that state-run economies do not work. China right now, I have been told, has perhaps the largest real estate bubble that has ever existed in mankind, and that is in their commercial real estate market, where 70% of the Chinese economy is building infrastructure in country, and it's sitting empty. It's new infrastructure that's sitting empty, and that at some point this is going to collapse, because there has never been a financial bubble like this in all time and space. This is my understanding, and it's going to happen. Is it going to happen next week, or 2 years from now, or 12 years from now? It's going to happen, and when it does, there's going to be a real reckoning by China that it's not the shining star in any way. Thank you. You've all been terrific. Everybody online and everybody here. Hanging in there. I mean, you had other places to be this evening. You chose to be here. Thank you. Really, thank you.
Hi, Gary. How's it going? It's great. I'm Dylan Draper. I'm from University of California, Santa Cruz. I appreciate your free market approaches to energy. I had some questions regarding current regulations right now are allowing for mountaintop coal removal, and
the fracking for natural gas, which keeps them competitive. So even though you support the free market approach to energy, where do you draw the line between health and safety?
Well, so fracking, I'm going to keep an open mind on fracking because you know, the fact that in Pennsylvania you should turn on your water faucet and before fracking took place, that water came out of there and now you can light it. That's a real concern. It's a real live concern. I mean, we should all be concerned about that. And then mountaintop mining. You know, fundamental to this country is private property rights. So if you're hacking off the top of the mountain and you own the mountain, is that your right to be able to cut off the top of the mountain? If you start drawing lines when it comes to private property rights, then fundamentally, I think you're bringing an end to what this country is all about also. So I'm not going to get in the mining business I mean, I climb Mount Everest. I mean, my lifestyle is the mountains. I live just north of Taos because the skiing is as good as anywhere on the planet. And no, I don't like to see environmental eyesores in any way. So now you're back to rules and regulations and the restoration of these areas after they're done. And now you're back to EPA, whether that's state or federal, where you have to, where before you can commence the hacking off the top of the mountain, you have to present a plan on what it's going to look like afterwards, and you don't get the permit in the first place if you can't produce that plan. And I think that's good. I mean, that's back to not that's getting back to not doing away with the EPA, and that's back to balancing a property right that, yes, you have the right to be able to do that because it is private land, but we have drawn lines there, and I think perhaps those are important lines also.
So
I don't want a cement plant built next to my house because somebody has there's zoning. And so much of our daily lives are affected by zoning, which I think is a good thing, because you don't want the potential that mountaintop is going to someday be eliminated because those are the plans. But you should know that ahead of time before you purchase your site of that property.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank the folks here in the audience tonight from universities of California, various campuses, as well as Johns Hopkins University, for really terrific questions and your participation, as well as the national and international audience, which we get here on Yowie.com. I want to thank Professor Gutman for putting this together, and we encourage you to go to terryjohnson2012.com, follow up, and if you've got anything that you want to reach us, just do that through the website. Again, thank you all for coming, and
I want to make a pitch. I want to make a pitch. You know, if you like what you heard for your vote, I'd like to make a pitch for a venti chai tea latte, $5. Donate $5 if you like what you heard.
And I'll up that to 42. Remember, you heard all night, or 43%. So anyway, we're here, and you know, no votes have been cast yet. This is really open, and I think you're sitting in a room with, I think the most qualified and person who has the most active, fertile mind on issues out there today, and we really encourage your help. Thank you again for coming tonight, and to all you out there in Yowie land.